A 25-year-old who invests just $100 a month into a simple stock market index fund can retire with over $1 million without ever earning a six-figure salary or picking a single winning stock. That sentence sounds like an exaggeration or a scam. Yet, it is simple mathematics backed by more than a century of verified stock market data from the United States. And the strange part is that almost nobody is taught this math in school, despite it being one of the most powerful financial tools available to an ordinary working person. Meanwhile, millions of people spend decades working hard for every paycheck while completely missing the one mathematical principle that could have quietly made them wealthy in the background the entire time. Stay with me until the end of this video, because I am going to show you the exact math behind this claim, walk through a real verified case of someone who used it to build an enormous fortune from almost nothing, and explain precisely why this concept is left out of nearly every classroom in the world. In the next 12 minutes, I am going to break down the exact mathematical principle that turns small, ordinary amounts of money into life-changing wealth, show you a real, verified example of compounding in action, and give you the specific steps you can take starting today, regardless of how much or how little you currently earn. Growing up outside the United States, nobody ever explained this clearly to me. So let us break it down properly. Ronald Reed worked as a janitor and gas station attendant in Vermont for his entire career, never earning more than a modest working class income. And yet, when he passed away in 2014, he left behind an estate worth approximately $8 million, which stunned the small town where he had lived quietly for decades. Ronald Reed did not win the lottery, did not receive an inheritance, and did not work in finance. He simply invested small amounts of money consistently into stable, well-known companies over more than 5 decades, and allowed one mathematical principle to do almost all of the work for him, while he continued living a simple, unremarkable life. That single principle, the same one responsible for his $8 million fortune, is exactly what we are about to break down in complete detail. Because once you understand how it works, you will never look at small amounts of money the same way again. Here is the first thing most people never truly understand. Compound interest is simply the process of earning returns, not only on the money you originally invested, but also on all of the previous returns that money has already earned, which means your growth does not stay flat over time. It accelerates the longer you allow it to continue. Think of it this way. Imagine a small snowball rolling down a long, snowy hill. And at first, it barely grows at all. But the further it rolls, the more snow sticks to its surface, and the more snow that sticks. The faster new snow continues to stick to it, which means the size of the snowball at the bottom of the hill depends far more on the length of the hill than on how big the snowball was when it started rolling. This is not a theory. The S&P 500 index, which tracks 500 of the largest publicly traded companies in the United States, has delivered an average annual return of approximately 10% over more than 50 years, according to widely cited historical market data. Which means money invested into this index does not just grow, it grows on top of its own previous growth year after year. The actionable lesson here is that the single most important factor in this entire equation is not how much money you start with. It is how much time you allow that money to keep growing, which means starting small today is mathematically more powerful than starting large 10 years from now. But here is what most people completely miss about this. The actual numbers behind this math are far more dramatic than most people would ever guess. Picture this. If a 25-year-old invests just $100 every single month into a simple index fund that earns the historical average return of approximately 10% annually, that account would grow to over $1 million by the time that person turns 65, without ever increasing the monthly contribution amount even once across those 40 years. This is something that most people outside the United States have never heard of, which is exactly why I want to break it down as simply as possible. The total amount actually contributed across those 40 years is only about $48,000. which means more than 95% of the final $1 million total comes purely from growth on growth, not from the money that was actually deposited. Here is the thing most people do not realize. If that same 25-year-old waits until age 35 to start instead, contributing the exact same $100 per month for the remaining 30 years, the final total drops to approximately $200,000, which means a single 10-year delay can cost someone roughly $800,000 in lost future wealth. The specific action here is to open a simple brokerage account or a tax-advantaged retirement account, such as a Roth individual retirement account, and begin investing even a small, consistent amount as early as possible. Because the data clearly shows that the starting date matters significantly more than the starting amount. Now, this is where it gets genuinely interesting, because the reason this math is not widely taught connects directly to how most education systems were originally designed. Imagine spending 12 or more years in a school system that teaches algebra, geometry, and advanced calculus in great detail, yet never spends a single class period explaining how compound growth applies directly to a person's own bank account. And this gap exists not because the math is too difficult, but because personal finance education was never prioritized as a core part of most national curriculums. According to surveys cited by the Council for Economic Education, a large portion of American states still do not require a standalone personal finance course for high school graduation, which means millions of students graduate having mastered abstract math concepts while never once applying that same math to their own future wealth. Growing up outside the United States, this gap was even more pronounced because financial literacy was rarely discussed at home or in school, which meant an entire generation grew up assuming that wealth was something earned only through a high salary, rather than something that could be quietly built through consistent investing and patient compounding. The practical lesson here is that waiting for a formal education system to teach this concept is not a reliable plan, which means taking just a few hours to understand compound growth on your own. Through free resources, simple calculators, and verified data can do more for your financial future than years of unrelated math instruction ever did. Let me take this one step further, because the next part changes everything, because understanding the math is only valuable if it is paired with the right kind of patience. Here is the piece that nobody talks about. Even after understanding exactly how compound interest works, most people still fail to benefit from it. Not because the math stops working, but because human emotion consistently interferes with the process, causing people to withdraw their money early during market downturns or stop contributing altogether during difficult financial periods. Warren Buffett has frequently emphasized that successful investing depends far more on behavior and patience than on intelligence or technical skill. And his own approach of holding quality investments for extremely long periods of time, sometimes decades without selling, demonstrates exactly how compounding rewards those who simply allow it to continue uninterrupted. This is the moment where most people's understanding of money changes completely. Because the real obstacle to building wealth through compounding is rarely a lack of access to good investments. It is almost always a lack of patience during the inevitable periods when markets decline temporarily before eventually continuing their long-term upward trend. The actionable step here is to set up automatic monthly contributions into your investment account so that the decision to keep investing is removed from your emotions entirely. Because automating the process is one of the most reliable ways to ensure that short-term fear never interrupts a decades-long compounding plan. We have covered 4 things so far. What compound interest actually means using the snowball analogy, the exact math behind turning $100 a month into over $1 million, why schools almost never teach this concept clearly, and why most people still fail at compounding even after learning the math. And now it is time to bring this all back to where we started. Here is the full answer to the question this entire video has been building toward. And this is exactly why $100 can genuinely become $1 million over time. The math is not a trick, a scam, or an exaggeration. It is simply the result of time and consistency, multiplying small amounts of money through decades of compounding, which is precisely how Ronald Read, a janitor with no financial background and no special investment knowledge, was able to quietly accumulate $8 million by the time of his death. Ronald Read did not need to predict the next major stock, time the market perfectly, or take enormous risks. He simply invested consistently in stable companies over more than 5 decades and allowed the same mathematical principle we just walked through to multiply his money far beyond what his modest income would ever have suggested was possible. And this is something that most people outside the United States have never heard explained this clearly. The same exact math that built Ronald Read's fortune is available today to anyone with access to a basic brokerage account. Regardless of their nationality, their salary, or their educational background, which means the real barrier preventing most people from building similar wealth has never been a lack of opportunity. It has always been a lack of awareness about how powerfully time and consistency work together. The math that schools never taught you is sitting quietly inside every dollar you choose to invest starting today, waiting patiently for time to do what it has always done. The most expensive mistake you can make with this math is not investing the wrong amount. It is simply waiting one more year before you start, because time is the one ingredient in this entire equation that can never be replaced once it is passed. If you know someone who has ever said, "I will start investing once I earn more money," share this video with them. Because the real lesson here was never about needing more money. It has always been about needing more time. Subscribe for more, these type of personal finance-related videos. I cover everything in plain and simple language. No finance degree needed, no complicated strategies.